Okay, so, but what I'm saying is, where we're transitioning is FDR from being isolationist to an internationalist of what's going on here. What you want to keep in mind for tomorrow, as far as the quiz here, you don't have to remember the five neutrality acts before he got into the war. You just got to know that Roosevelt and the United States are very reluctant. But all you guys are going to answer me this: what day or after what day did almost everybody in America became non-isolationist and very interventionist? What day? Pearl Harbor. You really see people lining up to enlist, and people, the America First Committee. There is an America First Committee. America First Committee, of course, all the way up until that time, led by people like Lindbergh, Bora, Robert Taft. They were for being neutral. Let's do a little chronology of FDR. Don't worry, we're going to fill this in third and fourth period tomorrow, but I want to go through like a general way that you need to know for tomorrow's quiz. I'll ask you questions about this in a way that what's going on between him and Congress. Right? He sees the rise of fascism. He sees it probably be a possible danger with the United States into the war. He does a couple of economic things to prevent the war to spread into the Western Hemisphere. What are the couple of economic things that he do, or maybe even one of the things you probably do know, to kind of like change the course with our neighbors in the Western Hemisphere? What are a couple of things economically did he do? One, instead of we have like the moral diplomacy and the Roosevelt corollary, we have the what? What's the kind of new kind of like mission for him and with everybody? Yes, good neighbor policy. All right. What is really causing a lot of business and kind of economic resentment with other countries? What is passed not under FDR but under Hoover that causes a lot of resentment? Very good. All right. The Harley Smooth tariff. It doesn't all right. It's all right if you say the other congressman's name. All right. The Harley Smooth tariff. So the Harley Smooth tariff is causing a lot of resentment. So what does he do? All you need to know that he negotiates a lot of reciprocal trade agreements, particularly with Latin American countries, to increase international trade and lower tariff barriers. You should know that for tomorrow. That there are some economic things that he's doing to kind of build up friendly relationships with countries and also to prevent the rise of fascism and dictatorship in the Western Hemisphere. You really would not have to worry too much about Canada because Canada is a part of what? Commonwealth of what? Great Britain. That's the thing is you just have to be worried about the kind of like the North Atlantic kind of sea travel and what kind of like the German like maybe potential submarines that's going out there and just kind of like holding trade with them. Yes. Go ahead. Yes. Who? If we're so afraid of this, that's the best question. And I think that's a historical question that all history teachers get really love. Okay, because whether again you go into history, there's two great presidents. All right, I know people are gonna say Washington and mention some other ones too as well, like that. But you think of two, Lincoln and FDR. Right? But here's the thing is I would say to Brayton and to everybody else in here, you don't want to be a great president. Because you know why you don't want to be a great president? Because both of those presidents, a lot of their administrations is doing war. And FDR, why is he elected? There's so much for his dictatorship. Again, it's fireside chats. It's people who are like, I'm going to tell you the truth, and I'll say this on video right now. Ronald Reagan is a very popular president in history. I don't like him, all right, for like a lot of reasons. But I cannot deny his popularity. People can relate to people like that in a very way, and he was very personable. And they feel by 1940, especially the third one, and he has a draft. in September, he has a draft before the election. All right. There's he they are probably in the mindset he's bringing us out of the depression, or some people might even say he's brought me out of the depression. I'm going to go with Roosevelt, not Wendell Willkie. There was not very good, strong opponents, not popular ones. Maybe Huey Long in 1936 before FDR had him killed, allegedly. No, he didn't. That might have kind of would have ended his maybe possibly. I still think he would have beat Huey Long too. I think you guys, what you guys should do is kind of close your eyes and just kind of imagine the pictures of FDR. You don't really see a maniacal, mean person. You see somebody who's smiling. You see somebody that's kind of older, kind of someone who's friendly, someone you probably that was nice. That makes a difference. And that's a great question. You have to say that if we're so scared of dictatorship, so scared of wrong, why is he elected 4 times and by such big margins? Weak opponent, and he was just a man of the times. Very good question like that. So now to get back to FDR International, we got the economics, what he does. All right. Now Congress is going to try to restrain him with several neutrality acts. You don't have to remember each one. I'm just going to mention some of them from 1935 to like 1939. All right, what some of they did in general. First thing is that you cannot trade with belligerent nations. Not even an American citizen like Lilly cannot trade with a belligerent nation. They say you cannot do that in one of the neutrality acts. And then one of the other neutrality acts that come on, you cannot loan money to belligerent nations. You cannot travel to belligerent nations. So it's really preventing any type of American involvement. We already had American involvement in Europe before U.S. entered World War One with some passengers are traveling, Lusitania. Already had Hoover already helping out the Serbians and people in Eastern Europe. Your Congress is trying to prevent that, trying to prevent us from getting this into any type of involvement for any type of conflict. All right, in there. What are some of the conflicts that's happening before Hitler really invades Poland in 1941? Well, 1935, you got Mussolini again attacks Ethiopia, right? And they eventually conquers Ethiopia by 1936. 1937 is the big one. Some people say World War II starts in 1937 with the Japanese attack on the Chinese mainland. Beijing bombing them, and all the mainland cities in China. So what is the U.S. going to do? What is the rest of Europe going to do? Really not too much at all. And so Congress has passed all these neutralities. 1937, Roosevelt does mention in a speech, you don't have to remember the year, he says that these belligerent nations should be contained, or what's the health word when you're trying to contain a disease epidemic? Quarantine. So he makes a quarantine speech. So you see Roosevelt already saying that we're probably going to have to need something already here too, because we may get involved. So it's a quarantine speech in 1937. Finally, Roosevelt, at his urging almost in a way, at around 19, you get Germany invades Poland in September of 1939. All right, so that's really what people say started World War II. So Roosevelt says, what about if they pay cash for, any type of arms? So cash and carry, as they say. So that is passed in there. So as part of one of the neutrality acts. 1940 is going to be the big year. That's the big year. Congress is going to be saying America first. Whatever you do, Roosevelt, don't get us involved in this war. And Roosevelt's already doing things to try to set the place setting for the war. One of the things he starts doing is says, well, let's take a look how Germany is doing in Europe right now. Right now, you see Japan has already gotten into China. They're going into Southeast Asia. But let's kind of like go back to like look what Germany doing. Who was the first big European country to surrender to France? Right. So like that. France is the first one to surrender. And a lot of people, of course, here in America says, "Oh, they just like just threw down their arms, surrender." Surrendering is not defeat. I understand it because they knew the Germans had already kind of like, blitzkrieg them. And it says, at this time, ran them off at Dunkirk. This is time to do that. So that they have fallen, right, in here. So this is 1940. And then you get the Battle of Britain, and they're just really, the Luftwaffe is really like, bombing the heck out of London. That's where you guys get, again, like, the stories coming from like the people experienced during this war and everything. So here at this time, like the experiences they were going through, and of course Churchill is crying for Roosevelt's help. So Roosevelt says first, like, how about this? What about we give you some destroyers if we take some of your bases over here in the Western Hemisphere? All right, you get it. So there's some British bases here. It's called destroyers for bases. 1940. And again, you don't have to remember so much the order. You just remember what Roosevelt is doing, what's Congress trying to do to restrain him, and how Roosevelt is creeping into this war before December 7th, 1941. In September, we get the draft on there. And as you know, comparing to World War One, there's a draft. But what's the difference between this draft and the draft in World War One? What can you tell me right now? The timeline. No, it's nothing about the draft. Think about when the draft is kind of like put in place. It started before they even joined the war. And this is what Naomi is probably and some other are puzzled about. Like, it's an election year. It's 1940. And he's going to say he's going to draft young men. And he gets elected by over 400 electoral votes. There's no way any modern president could ever do something like this. There's just no way. That's just not. I don't care Republican or Democrat. That's just not going to happen. It's just a moment of the times. He has a draft. He's elected in here. He knows what's going on. England is barely hanging on. So he says in December, he makes another speech. It's not quarantine. It's called, you know, that America should be the arsenal for democracy. So he's doing a lot of PR. He's saying that we should be an arsenal for democracy. Don't worry, we're going to take all these things down that we're kind of talking about in December of 1940. Yes. This is his third term. That's a good question. Trying to get your time right because well, okay, let me correct myself. He's not officially in his third term. Okay, so I think that's what you kind of called me because it's December 1940. He doesn't really get in until January, 1941 for his third term, but he's elected. So, like that. So this is kind of like the beginning almost of his third term that he's doing this. In January 1941, he probably makes one of his greatest speeches, ever, like again in a way, saying that he's trying to again get people to go on with this. He's saying that there should everybody in the world, not just America, and you've seen the Norman Rockwell painting, should have four freedoms that everybody should have. All right. And the problem is that you guys have seen the Norman Rockwell painting, but that was not his intent, was just for America. He's trying to say this for everybody. And you're saying to yourself, what are these four freedoms? Well, one, he says, yes, you should have freedom of speech. All right. Everybody should have freedom to say something. You see the man speaking out there, freedom of speech in there. All right. And he's, instead of him saying freedom of religion, he says freedom to worship or freedom of faith to what you want to, you know, believe in, and it's your personal choice. He's trying to make it a little bit more than not just America here. All right, in here. And I really like what he says here. He says, you should have freedom from want, meaning that your basic needs should be provided for you. All right. Your basic needs should be kind of provided for you. You should have all those things in here. You should have, you know, what are your basic needs that you should have? What is those things that you should have freedom from want for? Water, shelter, like again, again, that's what you should, and food. You should have that. You should always have that in there. You should have that freedom from want in there. So, and that's his four freedoms, all right, in there. So, and the fourth freedom here that you think about that, you got freedom from want. Freedom. Did you have a question, Celeste? I know. I'm saying the fourth. I know I have not said like second. And the fourth freedom is, and it really just kind of, I've always, and he's really speaking about people in Europe and people in Asia, is freedom from fear. Right. So you should not have that and everything. You should not. And that kind of goes along with his theme, right, since the first term. Fear, want, it's all right. Want, speech, and faith. And this is again Roosevelt. Everybody like Lindbergh, all the American First people are saying he's trying to get us involved in the war somehow. Finally, in March, he convinces Congress with the Lend-Lease program. He says we're going to just lend, equipment and ammunition to allies or to people like again fighting these fascist nations. He made the analogy of this: if your neighbor's house is on fire and you have a garden hose, you lend it to him, all right, so he can put out the fire, and then afterwards you get the fire hose back. I don't know how we're gonna get the bullets and stuff like that back, but FDR what he's doing. He's basically supplying the help already in here, and I have to tell you, in 1940, and we'll talk. I think you guys will read about some of this. We're already beginning to escort some of this equipment over to Europe. And what do you think is happening in the Atlantic to some of our ships already in 1940? They're getting sunk. Like again, they're getting fired upon. They're getting attacked, merchant ships. And FDR is trying to keep it all quiet, because he knows that he's that's going to cause us to force us into war already. And I think one of the sneakiest, best things he does that Churchill loves is in August. It's called he meets with Churchill in northern Canada, and it's called the Atlantic Charter. They make the Atlantic Charter. All it is just the 14 points. Churchill is saying, hey, how do you see the world in several years from now? What should everybody in the world be doing? Well, they should have self-determination. You should have freedom of the seas. All it is really the 14 points. And he's actually urging Churchill to kind of England should start thinking about, relinquishing its colonies. Why is Churchill so pleasing to FDR? Why is he visiting him at night on this ship, having us, a few drinks with him and everything? Why is he coddling FDR? Why is he smoozing up to him? Maybe to get support. Yes, he wants actually probably American troops, and he actually asked for that. And FDR says, "No, I'm not going to give you that. I cannot send troops over to Europe. I cannot send troops over to Europe at this time, and there's just no way. Congress will not go for it." He said that look, before I die, can somebody find out if Lindbergh is a Nazi? Because the way that guy acts and stuff like that and everything in support of Germany and stuff. And this is our American hero too, like that, And he's just wondered about, because he's just so much saying that FDR is going to get some war. He's, again, he's supporting the Jews and all this kind of stuff, and he's criticized, right? So again, that is in August, and they make this Atlantic Charter for that. And it never tells the public. This is a secret meeting. We know it now, of course. But they're kind of like, well, when did you come up with this Atlantic Charter? Now, this is August 1941. You know the London Blitz is going on and everything. You know the story in December. You know that for December 7th, okay? And that eventually, like again, just drops everything down right there. Germany and Italy declares war on the U.S. December 11th. We declare war on Japan December 8th, the day after for that and everything. So I put on the sheet there. I says, you know what he says afterwards in there, but tell me what it means. A day that will live in infamy. What does that mean? What is infamy? What is the kind of like again? How would you describe that definition of infamy or infamous? What does that phrase mean? A day that will live in infamy. What do you think, Christian? Right. It's almost like, yeah, it's famous, but not for good things. I like your definition better. Like again, it's famous, but not for good things. It's infamous like that. And it's going to be a day that you guys, your grandchildren, will know. Like again, it might not get the exact day and stuff like that and everything, but that's going to be one. It's going to be one of those like September 11th, like that in there. I say in 2001, like again, so for 9/11. But that definitely is going to be a date, and that's a date that if you guys are writing an essay that you can't get wrong. Okay, I have to say that. Don't put the date down if you don't remember. If you're writing an essay like the day that we're bombed, like December 11th, don't do that. That's going to like be cringy. All right. So always remember, if you can remember that date, you probably a lot of you guys have it in your mind. Do that. So we're getting into the war now. The thing is now that for APUSH, we're not going to get into like as much as I'm going to talk about Midway, Stalingrad, and again, Germany has attacked Russia. Like again in here in 41, they have invaded Russia, so you got to think that that's on his mind too. Um, D-Day, Normandy, as much as what is he going to do on the home front? What do you know is already going to happen as a result of this war? What do you already know? Go ahead and shout them out to me. What do you think is going to happen? And I'll give you examples of this. Go ahead. When the soldiers come back home, there is a bus. They're like again everything. So that's why he creates the GI Bill. All right. In 1943, it's his idea that already there's going to be economy is going to go down. So they're looking at the patterns of war. So I'm going to create a GI Bill, low interest loans, money for colleges for returning soldiers, uh, housing and like it's again mortgage loans so they can get like into some nice neighborhoods. So it really is. That's an example of that, and I'm going to give you an example for each pattern that you guys are going to shout out for World War II. Go ahead. What else? What are the other maybe 6 patterns here? Go ahead. Women and minorities make incremental gains. Women, you've heard of these names before, like the Women Auxiliary Army Corps, the WACs, the Waves in the Air Force. Women will be serving pretty much somewhat besides combat actively. They will be training actively, even though some are not able to serve. This is really different. And what are they going to be doing at home? What are they going to be doing at home? Yeah, they're going to be working at these places, the jobs that men did. And what is so great, the productivity does not go down. And actually, what does go up is the quality of things. And a lot of these, and everybody has this picture, well, the women afterwards, Mr. Price, will go home. No, some of them will. So a lot of working women kind of like stay on some of these jobs or move on to other like maybe professions and stuff. So that's not the myth that they just all of a sudden just drop their rivet gun and just and just drop everything and just go. That does not happen, right? So you see that. And now come to one of the big things here with African American. You need, and that's going to be on your quiz mark. It's the double V campaign. Victory at home, victory overseas. And the guy that you will see in your quiz, because he's one of my heroes, is A. Philip Randolph. here. He's going to be a leader of like the African American community, trying to get more rights for African Americans at home and overseas too as well. You get the victory overseas, have African Americans serve, and then have them treated equally. You can say the modern civil rights movement starts with World War II. Because what is the hypocrisy of us fighting the Nazis? What are all the Nazis saying to the American soldiers about, like, hey, you're a Nazi, you're like you're a racist, like a white supremacist. What are the Nazis saying to the Americans? You're right, yeah, you're a racist white supremacist. Like that, and again, that will change a lot of people's minds. Like again, it does have an impact, really, to a lot of people, like that will go in politics in the future, like a Richard Nixon, who's a Republican, like that, and says, "Hey, Wendell Willkie fighting for civil rights and everything, so we need to do this." The Double V campaign. Now, here's what his biggest thing was. All this economy is being commanded by the government. These contracts are given to, like, to make tanks, to make guns, to produce stuff. Some of these businesses are discriminating. And FDR, what are you going to do about it? Well, I don't know what I can do because, I need the Democrats in the South. And A. Philip Randolph says, I have no idea what I'm going to do about it. We have a lot of African Americans. We can march to Washington while you're having this war. We're going to have a march. This is not 1963. This is 1942, 43. He's threatening, okay? A march. What do you think FDR thinks about a bunch, like, maybe 600,000 to maybe potentially 1 million African Americans marching to Washington, D.C.? What do you think about that? What does he think? He does not like that at all. So, with one executive order, you don't have to remember the number, 8802, he creates the Fair Labor Employment Practices Committee. Fair Labor Employment Practices Committee, or the Fair Employment Practices Committee. Okay, it doesn't really matter. And you know what that says? If you are going to contract to make tires for Jeeps for America, you cannot discriminate, you cannot segregate in your company. All right. So again, that's what A. Philip Randolph and this guy Charles White, NAACP, wanted, the Double V campaign. You see a lot of times African American newspapers have it printed, a logo and everything like that, say that we can participate. You've heard of the Tuskegee Airmen training for life again, to be working in the Air Force. They want to actively participate to prove themselves again, kind of compared to World War I. All right. Can we get one more, Pat? Go ahead.
What was it called?
The Fair Employment Practices Committee. All right. And again, that's by executive order. Now, on the other side here, just because I'll just do it for time's sake, we get the other pattern. Civil liberties are compromised. And this is our kind of, unfortunately, most infamous example, speaking about using that term, is Executive Order 9066. And this happened soon after Pearl Harbor in 1942, the Japanese relocation kind of like executive order. Now, I ask you, popular decision 1942 or unpopular? It's popular. Now, to me, as much as I admire FDR, I think this is the worst decision he's ever made. I still think so. All right? There's no change in my mind about that. All right. So about relocating Japanese because, and they take it to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court sides of FDR. It's a justifiable wartime measure. Korematsu versus United States. Justifiable. You have to do this during wartime. Sounds like what in World War I? Does anybody remember that case? Or Schenck versus United States, okay, like that. And they said that during that time. I'm going to end it there, but we are definitely going to start. We're going to start in class from what I just said after we fill this out about these things going on at home, and that will be on your quiz. All right. I promise you the stuff I talked about is just going to be on the quiz, okay? You will see these